Thank you for joining us. Good morning, my name is Iman Nazari Simmons. I have the distinguished privilege of facilitating this morning's session. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital, a public hospital and safety net trauma center just over the bridge in San Francisco. I also am a lecturer, adjunct faculty in the School of Public Health here at UC Berkeley. I have, for the past 8 years, taught a class on culture and public health practice and how discrimination impacts health disparities. So I am very eager to listen to our panel and to learn with all of you. I was so excited that this conference is embracing the role of Islamophobia as it impacts health outcomes. I think that the time has come for us to reframe the issue of discrimination as it impacts individuals and the health status of communities. And we're going to reframe Islamophobia from a political issue, from a viral kind of social media context, and reframe it into how does Islamophobia function as a social determinant of health. And what are social determinants of health? Well, those are the true impacts of health status, where you live, whether or not you face discrimination like racism, like sexism, what is your socioeconomic status, etc. And our speakers this morning are going to share with us, discuss their research and their practice looking at the impact of discrimination on aspects of health like stress, mental health, aspects of gun violence and how that impacts our communities. This morning we have Rania Awad. She is from Stanford University School of Medicine, as well as Intuna College. She is going to share her research around the Chapel Hill shootings. We have Khadija Khaja from the School of Social Work. She traveled all the way from Indiana to share her thoughts with us around the human cost of Islamophobia, countering it effectively. We also have Hamad Khan from traveling a little bit closer from Davis, UC Davis School of Medicine, looking at media, mental health, and chronic stress. We hope soon our other panelists will be joining us, Hina Tai, and Amelia Noor Ashiro. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rania, and she is going to share with us her recent thinking. Thank you. Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings and peace. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. The name of Allah, most merciful, most gracious. I'm very happy to be here today to present some research that has especially affected the Muslim community and work, an incident I would say that really hit home with so many of us that happened about a year ago. And as many of you have heard about the Chapel Hill shootings, I'd like to clarify that this research is actually not my own directly, but rather the first author on the slide, who is Iman Musa. I am the senior researcher. She conducted the study through my lab that is called the Stanford Muslims and Mental Health Lab, of which there's many lines of research that run, one of which is focused on social justice and the impacts on mental health. So this is her study that she had conducted, and she couldn't be here today. She sends her apologies. She's from St. Louis University. So this is a joint effort between the two universities, St. Louis University and Stanford. And here we're going to talk a little bit about what it means. And this first slide, I think many of you in this audience are well familiar with, kind of the impact of hate crimes and discrimination on the Muslim population. So if we look at some of the research conducted, you'll see in the first point here, after September 11th, there is a much higher rate of hate crimes and discrimination towards Muslims than in the past. A survey of over 1,000 Muslims showed that almost half of them under the age of 30 felt that they have been verbally taunted, treated with suspicion, physically threatened or attacked or targeted by Muslims. Pretty significant number. Also, this last point here is actually Iman's newest study.
where she's looking at a group of Muslims really focusing on the issue of identity and how that relates to anxiety. And she found that 90% of her sample experienced some kind of religious-based discrimination in this last year. I can tell you for myself personally, for the first time in my life, having grown up my entire life here in America, I was told just a few months ago, somebody yelled out from a stop sign at a stoplight, "Go back to your country." And I thought, I have heard that people talk about that often, but never happened to me until this year. So we're really at a peak nowadays with discrimination and hate crimes. So if we shift then to the psychological impact of what this means on Muslims who are experiencing this amount of essentially trauma, right? You find that for other groups of people that have faced discrimination for a long time, decades worth, which is kind of where the Muslim community is heading now, there is definitely a negative impact on mental health. Secondly, you also find that whenever there's a high-profile traumatic event, like the Chapel Hill shooting was for the Muslim community, there's definitely going to be adverse mental health effects for the entire community. Also, we'll talk about extensive media coverage, because for the Chapel Hill shooting specifically, it really circulated quite a bit on social media, as many of you know, and then eventually made its way to the standard news outlets. And how individuals cope with these kind of race-related, or racism, we should say, related stress, can really then exaggerate and exacerbate their mental health symptoms that may already be there at baseline. So as you know, in case you don't, in February of 2015, there were 3 young Muslim college students in Chapel Hill, California, who were shot execution style by a person who lived in their complex who did not like Muslims. And there's ample evidence that this was actually a religious-based hate crime. And this really affected so many of us, and as we'll see in the points going forward, there was a lot of feelings of, especially in the young population, of identifying with these 3 students and feeling that this could have been them. Anyone who's wearing a headscarf like the 2 ladies here, or anybody who is associated with Islam in some way, could have very well have been the victims of this crime. So in this study, the idea was then to figure out what were the reactions of Muslims to this particular hate crime, and how did they cope overall. The study was conducted in St. Louis. This is where Iman was from, as I was mentioning, and she conducted 60-minute focus groups based on the shootings. She recruited young Muslims. You had to be Muslim, and you also had to be somebody who had knowledge of this shooting. And there were 60-minute focus groups in which she recruited people through social media and email. So granted, from the outset here, where we have a very targeted, almost self-selected population. But nevertheless, I think the outcome is very interesting. So that's a young age group, range 19 to 45, mostly in the 20s, that college age and grad age. More than half were female, more than half were almost all were South Asian, but certainly also Middle Easterns and other ethnicities as well participated. So here, the way they actually did this study, for those who are interested in the scale that was used, it was called the Racism-Related Coping Scale. And this particular scale was first created to figure out specific strategies for African Americans that dealt with racism. And what Iman did here is she tried to adapt the scale to the Muslim population. Then she took the focus groups and did qualitative methodology for the MaxQD, a software, is what she used. Now here are some of the results that she found. So when we talk about coping, how do people cope with this perceived racism that they were experiencing? You'll find here, and if you look at the numbers, you see the ones that are number 9s or number 8s, racially conscious action. Right, so people really feeling like whatever that they were experiencing was directly targeted towards them as Muslims. And others dealt with this by spiritual coping, which isn't terribly surprising, but also interesting that people went back to the very faith, that they actually took help from their faith background, even though this actually was what they were targeted for. The concept of bargaining, which is an interesting concept. This is a cognitive structure in which a person then may reduce their own levels of religiosity or their own levels of feeling or being outwardly Muslim, let's say, in order to bargain with other people who may perceive them as a threat. So different people are reacting in different ways. So you have some who are kind of going closer to the religion and some who are going further away from it, depending on how it is that they're actually coping. Hypervigilance is a term that we take from post-traumatic stress disorder literature, which means that people are essentially on guard more often than usual. So certainly some are feeling effects of what we call PTSD. Also anger or confrontation are ways other people have dealt. So like the person who yelled at me at the stoplight, had I had, chosen the method of anger, I would have yelled back. This is where I'm from. I have nowhere else to go. So different people are dealing in different ways. Some have felt empowered, but certainly less so. But most people are kind of feeling on one extreme or the other, either getting closer to the faith or further away based on this incident. So how is it that she figured this out? A little bit about the coding. There were 3 coders for this particular study, and they met several times to develop inter-coder reliability and make sure that they were all on the same page. They decided on 3 aspects: reactions, coping, and the impact of the event. And here I'm going to share with you a couple of statements from the folks who actually took the study. And I'll point out just a couple of key points here that they had mentioned, because I think they're actually really important. Like this particular person is somebody who wears a headscarf, a hijab. And she says, I really felt like people were after me. And then I started to become afraid and thought to myself, should I be afraid, right? Should I walk by myself to my car, right? Should I take it to a degree that I have to live in fear, or just trust that God will protect me? So people are really dealing with trying to figure out what this actually means for them, and could they be the victims of the same senseless crime? Over here, this person here is talking about feeling outside of their close group, right? Feeling really awkward, even with other Muslims. Because of this feeling that they're having, they're wondering if other people are feeling the same way they are, right? Even people from the same faith background. So sometimes they felt really uncomfortable to express to each other and talk face-to-face how difficult it was. So instead, people took to social media and posted their feelings and emotions on Facebook and the like. And interestingly enough, that's actually where so much of the circulation and the feelings and angst that was felt at the Chapel Hill shooting, that's really where people saw all of the reactions come out. Here, this person is talking also about reactions and saying, it was really upsetting, and when people noticed and asked, what's wrong with you, the person couldn't quite put to words their exact feelings, saying, I really don't know. I guess it was just a whole loss of faith in humanity. But this person, interestingly enough, took the next step of help, which many people actually don't. They sort of just simmer in it. But this person went to campus ministry to talk about it, and actually made a vigil, kind of helped in creating the vigil on campus. But the last sentence here is what really gets me. It says, I feel helpless and hopeless. And this, I think, is exactly what so many people felt after the Chapel Hill shootings. Like, what do you do? It's so senseless. What do you do about this feeling, right? And that's something I really wanted to highlight, this particular feeling, because it shows up in so many different people have the same exact reaction. Now for coping, we talked before how some people had anger and some people tried to block the memory, that after a certain amount of time they really felt that it was, they were too saturated in it and needed to distance themselves from the whole incident. Every time a picture was posted and so on, it was just overwhelming. What do you do with this really awful situation? Others said, I did not talk to my friends about it because I knew what were they going to say. I didn't want to bring emotion and stuff. Right? All my friends were in a different place in Chicago, and I didn't want to text them and kind of over-text them. But then I tried to talk to somebody closer, right? Her husband. But even he was really angry and didn't want to talk about it. So people were feeling like, who do I talk to? Who do I reach out to in my attempt to cope? Do I talk to my parents? But no, I don't want to do that because that actually would scare them. In fact, many people in the study said it was, they felt the younger population eventually coped better than the older population, who this kind of shooting really scared them because it was targeted towards young people. So they preferred actually not talking to the older population like their parents and grandparents and the like. So people just, it was really, I think, a very difficult incident to cope with altogether. Here, this person also in coping strategies, seeing people who are not Muslim and other minorities in general, people who come from completely different backgrounds posting about it, I guess that really helped me. So as we're shifting here the discussion in what actually helped then, right, there's here a discussion about seeing other people embrace this as well, understanding that it was a religious hate crime, and understanding how senseless it was, and other people showing up for vigils, other people sending condolences, other people really identifying as well. And that I think helped people kind of come across, or kind of get over, I should say, the hump of feeling really hopeless and helpless. So people were emailing local media who eventually